Hi, welcome to Strength Reversed. It's Amy. Thank you so much for joining me today for another installment of Light Seers Sundays. And this is where I take a major arcana card from the Light Seers deck and compare it to the Muse Tarot so that I can learn the Muse Tarot. And then I will do a spread based on that card from the Tarot for Light Seers book by Chris Ann. And today's card is the Hermit. This is the Hermit in the Light Seers. I really wanted to get this video made before I ran off to work out and I'm meeting up with a friend because, of course, I was supposed to make it last week and didn't. And this is the card in the Muse Tarot. And what strikes me about the Hermit card, this is the RWS and it's the, what is it called? The Wiser Tarot version, because I picked this one because I knew the colors would be beautiful, and they are. And these colors are the colors of the third eye and seeing. And what strikes me about the Hermit every time I look at this card is the lantern. And over the last couple of weeks, as I've sat with this card and read up on this card, a lot of things have come to me about this lantern, and I see it in a little different way. The Hermit is connected to many other cards that I didn't expect to find a connection to, but I see the Hermit keywords as sacred loneliness. It's a difficult path, and it's a very solitary path, and there's some strength in that, and that the loneliness that the Hermit undertakes willingly is very difficult, but not many people are willing to go behind the High Priestess's curtain. And I think that's where his journey is happening. He goes behind the veil, and it's beyond just intuition. It's a reconnection to our sacred. It's that part of ourselves, the connection to our highest self, and really remembering our divinity. And some people just don't want to go there. It is scary. It's scary back there. And part of what makes it scary is how we get there. Because I think sometimes we don't get there, although it's a very intentional choice to explore that area, we often don't find ourselves there on purpose. I think the Eight of Cups is a good example of the beginning of the Hermit's journey, starting to climb that mountain, leaving behind things that he doesn't necessarily want to leave behind, that he still finds valuable. Maybe it's relationships or situations, but he knows he has to do this to make his life to know himself and to make his life meaningful. But the Hermit, for me, is already at the top of that mountain, shining that light. And in the reversed aspect of the Hermit, we see that maybe he's gone too far, or it's become a prison, and there's a sense of isolation. And I heard a quote somewhere, and I can't remember where. I usually write this stuff down, and I didn't. But it said, knowing the line between the silence that heals and the isolation that wounds. And so in its reversed aspect, it can be a more wounding isolation. We do still need those connections to people, even when we are on a solitary path, because that's where we find meaning in life. And that's where often where the difficulties arise is through our connections to other people. That's how we learn, and that's where we can mine for all of those gems, because they usually don't come from the easy places. It's usually the difficulties that, if we are willing to look and see and shine that lantern on the difficulties, that's where we can get the gold nuggets out of those experiences. There's a Rumi quote, "The wound is where the light enters," and I think this Hermit has been so wounded, he has nothing left to do but really go inside, because there's a book that calls this inner space as opposed to outer space, and exploring that. And it also talked about why we're so obsessed with UFOs and aliens, and it was kind of an interesting read. Anyway, here is the Hermit in the Light Seers deck, and you notice the lantern has been left behind. The guidebook talks about her own inner light shining and using her inner light, and the Hermit is learning to really trust that light and stoke that fire, because the fire that's in the lantern, we have to keep it lit, and that requires constant coming back to ourselves and coming back to ourselves. And I like how Chris-Anne describes the little breadcrumbs from the universe that are left there. And this is the most daytime lit up Hermit that I've seen, but there is this self-imposed isolation and this quietness that this person is experiencing because they have removed themselves from all of that noise, and now they can see that light, or they can hear their own voice. I've always thought of the Hermit's lantern as shining light in all of the dark places, all of the nooks and crannies, and the places where the cobwebs are and that the dark things lie, and being willing to look at that. But I'm seeing it a little differently now. I still think that can be part of the Hermit's light, but as I sat with this and meditated and thought of tower moments that have completely demolished current situations, and certainly the Hermit could start off on that turning inward as the outer shell falls away, the form of his life falls away, and so there's really nowhere left to turn. I see the Hermit at the top of the mountain. So whereas Eight of Cups, he's just starting that journey, and I know in tarot, mountains can mean difficulties, but it's been a difficult climb, but I see him at the top of the mountain shining his lantern and thinking of the lantern as attracting, and not just giving off light, but attracting things to that light. And when everything falls away after a tower moment, we're often left in a very lonely situation, very lonely. And we find that we have changed and the form of our lives has changed. And sometimes many people and relationships will fall away because of, we think the tower is about one thing, but it affects, there are ripples, and it affects many things, and people leave, and you're left feeling different and feeling like you can't connect with anyone because no one is understanding where you are. And when you're in that tarot place, it can be very lonely. And so I see the lantern almost as a bat signal, sending up the bat signal and seeing what comes to you. And it signals others. It signals others who are ready for your particular light and your particular vibration. And that can attract a lot of bugs too. It can attract the gnats and the mosquitoes, and all of the yuckies that come are yours. They're yours to integrate or, smash or find a way to live with, or see, to understand where the yuckies are coming from. I should really find a better word than yuckies, but you know what I'm talking about. All the little the pests, they are going to pop up when you're in this new place and you're shining this new light. and they are there to help you, I think, attune the vibration. Because if I see those pests as aspects of myself that I don't like, or and I don't mean that in a new age fundamentalist, you're responsible for everything. I don't think you're responsible for other people, but sometimes they can hold up a mirror for you, and you can look within. So they bring up what needs healing for both of you, and they don't have to heal. You can heal and learn that lesson and send them on their way, or the fact that they don't want to learn doesn't diminish your opportunity to learn. And I think the Hermit relishes those opportunities. So they bring up people who are now vibrating at your frequency in a good way, and they also bring the yuckies who want to come to that energy and use it, and you can, flick them away. The Hermit is more than just an inner focus. The Hermit is a cycle or era of just being solitary. And that's what I mean by sacred loneliness. I think it almost has a hanged man feeling, where we can easily become frustrated or sad because we're looking for these connections and we can't find them. And I want to read something, so bear with me. And this is Jung and Tarot, some light reading, and it's fascinating though. But the book talks about the Greek idea of single or solitary, also translating as unified, and that there's a quote, a biblical quote, that I, Jesus, say this: when a person finds himself solitary, he will be full of light, but when he finds himself divided, he will be full of darkness. So this unification, these bringing the little pests that come up and alchemizing them and figuring, letting them percolate and digesting it, changes the form. So it can go from something negative and be made into something positive. But here's the quote I want to read you. The book of Genesis represents the act of becoming conscious as the breaking of a taboo, as though the gaining of knowledge meant that a sacred barrier had been impiously overstepped. Genesis is surely right, inasmuch as each step to a greater consciousness is a kind of Promethean guilt. Though through the realization, the gods are in a certain sense robbed of their fire. That is to say, something belonging to the unconscious powers has been torn out of its natural connections and has been subordinated to conscious choice. The man who has usurped the new knowledge suffers, however, a transformation or enlargement of consciousness, which no longer resembles that of his fellow men. He has certainly raised himself above the human level of his time, but in doing so, he has also alienated himself from humanity. The pain of this loneliness is the God's revenge. I don't think it's God's revenge. I do think it's God's gift, but I do think it's a painful gift, and one that's worthwhile. And I asked in meditation, what can I do to make the light in my lantern stronger and brighter? And I just got recentering. And I'm learning that baby steps, you don't have to meditate for an hour. You can just take a moment throughout the day and recenter and come back to yourself and remember yourself, no matter how small that is, every day. There is a power in this loneliness, and the power is the gift of discernment. When you have a tower moment or an Eight of Cups moment, and you have to walk away from things that are no longer serving you, or they just crumble to the ground, and you experience this loneliness, the gift there is that you can be very discerning about who you let back in to to your aura, to your space, your spirit. And because you're already lonely, it's much easier to say you don't fit here, because it's not like getting rid of that person is going to make you lonely. You're already lonely. And so you can much more easily, you can be picky, okay, about who gets your space and who gets that energy and who's let in to your bubble. Okay, that's sacred loneliness. I do want to talk about numerologically, Hermit is a 9, and we see this being in this place where you've run the gamut, and the next number is going to be 10, which has in it number 1, which is a new beginning. But here's something I read. 9 represents the height of power that's attainable by a single digit, and it's also the number that we connect to gestation. And in math, the number 9 always returns to itself. So 6 times 9 is 54, and if you add 5 and 4, it's 9. So 9 always comes back to itself, and that is the power of the Hermit. Here is the spread that I'm going to do, and I don't think I'm going to turn the camera because I'm under duress. I'm pressed for time. I see my friend was calling me. But this is a 3-card spread. It is the Hermit's Lamp. The Hermit's Inner Lamp, a spread for finding your way. And I'm lost. Let's get some directions. So card number 1 is the Source. What needs to be healed? And where does my healing journey begin? Number 2 is the Illuminated Path. Where do I go from here? What methods, mindset, or approach could help me? And number 3 is the Lamplight. Insights into my evolution, the outcome, and the deeper wisdom I will be gifted. In other words, the meaning of life. So let's talk about this. I just love this Hermit. It's one of my favorites because it's not someone else. It focuses on her own power, and she has made this journey, and I love that card. Anyway, let me pull from the Light Seers, and then I will find these cards in the Muse. So number 1 is the Source. What needs to be healed? Oh God, this is, could be any number of things. The 6 of Wands. Yeah, my Chiron, I'm sure, like a lot of people's, is in Aries. So, you know, that's the wound of self. I think Wands is inspiration here. Okay. Here's the 6 of Wands in the Muse Tarot. I love a nice 6 of Wands because this is really, I love how this is almost like, you know, a dressing room mirror where it's a superstar. And I think that I can really see this in myself, in this need. What needs to be healed is this connection to trusting myself and to seeing myself as the best version of me. You know, I'm very hard on myself. And my healing journey, I think, begins in really seeing myself as good enough to be the star of my life. Ooh, self-worth. Good Lord. This Muse card really has special meaning for me, which I'm not going to get into right now, but this is something that I see a lot in meditation, and so I will take that. Number 2, the Illuminated Path. Where do I go from here? Yes, please. Tell me. Okay. The 9 of Wands. You see the pattern here with the wands. I do really think I just finished a cycle of a group where we talked a lot about calling back our energy, and so it makes sense to me that Wands is coming up. And I like the 9 because that relates to the Hermit. Let me find that. That is so beautiful. I like these Nine of Wands because they don't have that haggard, tired, beaten up look that the Rider-Waite has. What was the where do I go from here? What methods, mindset, or approach? Okay, well, when you, I've talked to you about my tower year and going through it, and I do feel like I've really had to fight for this light and for this energy and for all of these wands. I've really, really focused and struggled with getting something back for myself and trusting myself and connecting to that energy. And I think right now, I need to bask in that a little bit. And that is going to lead me back here, which is where I need to be. That honoring that part of myself and letting myself know, finally, for once in my life, that it was good enough and I did enough. And, you know, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And then the lamplight is insights into my evolution, the outcome, and the deeper wisdom I will be gifted. Wisdom, I need that. Ooh. Yes. Well, maybe we have the Three of Cups. Maybe it won't be so lonely anymore. You know, I can embrace this hermit path, and maybe you don't have to be behind the veil forever. Here is the Three of Emotions, it's called in the Muse Tarot. And what I like about this is that the people that are here together seem to be, I love this purple, which reminds me of the Hermit, seem to all bring their own gifts and have their own light. And so I'm really trying to bring people into my life who get it. And that I don't have to qualify anything or explain anything. They just get it. They've just done the work. Okay, well, there you go, the Hermit. And I know there are a lot of things I really wanted to say about the Hermit that probably came out all jumbled or didn't make sense, but there you go. It's powerful, and I'm kind of, you know, coming to a new appreciation of this loneliness cycle and seeing it as more sacred and as a integral part of my journey. Okay, my friend's called me a few times. I know she's probably like, where you at? So I will talk to you next week. Oh my gosh, I have to find the next card. Let me just, oh, well, no, that's not it. That's not it. The next major card is Temperance. Did I do that? I think I did Temperance. Okay, I can't even remember. It'll be Temperance unless, or it will be the Star. Did I do the Star? Good Lord, who knows? I'll have to look back in my notes. Okay, it'll be something. Bye.